Thank you all for coming to service. Thank you all for being here. This past week, our dear brother Baltazar mentioned that his father had just passed away, just passed to the spirit world. And so I'd like to ask all of us to just please keep his family in your prayers at this time as they grieve and as they send him off into the next world. And what Hannah just shared about the keys to the kingdom and the lecture that Dr. Celebre is giving. Many of you may or may not know, but he's a professor giving these presentations at HCI. And so if you'd like to hear it without the fee of being part of a university or graduate school, please join in and listen to it. It's incredible, incredible. They had the graduation of the 40-day workshop this past week. Incredible. And could I get new batteries? It's really incredible. Get a regular microphone.
Oh, it's really incredible the testimonies we hear. Many people come to the workshop because there's something in their life they're looking to correct in some way, maybe looking to grow and develop in some way. And after 40 days of being engulfed in prayer with people who are all seeking and hoping to be able to grow, to come to understand God, something must happen to you, right? And in many ways, I feel hearing the testimonies, hearing and seeing the experiences that they experience, I feel moved, because to me it becomes a testament that God is real and that God is alive when we desperately yearn to find God within our lives and to come to understand our true parents. This week I met with many different members, and every time I speak to any one of our members, there's something striking that comes up over and over again. I like asking the question, why did you join this movement? Because to me it's so fascinating. Fascinating why someone would uproot their lives in some way, shape, or form to follow God. And it's not that it's easy. It's not that you're going to banquets every night. It's not that you are, you're singing every day, you're partying every day. That's not what it is. Many of our members joined, and when they joined, it was a taking up responsibility in some way, shape, or form. Many of you went out for 7 years fundraising. Some of you didn't see the end of the 7 years and kept going, witnessing. It's so interesting. It's because many people also just don't complete their schooling, right? Maybe you have three months later, 3 months to graduate, and you decide, I'm going to drop everything for the sake of following God and following a path that was more meaningful. Well, one thing rings true each time. Everyone is searching for hope. No matter who you are, no matter where you're from, there is this deep internal yearning that maybe there's something out there. There's a phrase that goes, every critic is a disappointed idealist, right? So since we're younger, there are many people, we read in the news, many people who grow up believing in God somehow, but then at some point in time, we turn away, our faith changes, we feel we grew up to come to understand the realities of this world. Yet that doesn't change the fact that throughout our lives, we keep searching for meaning. When CARP or New Hope or many others go out witnessing their these 5 or 7 questions that people ask. What is the meaning of life? These are existential questions. Thank you. These are existential questions we ask. Who are we? Where did we come from? Where do we go? It comes up over and over. And I believe this yearning is what keeps us going. They say you can't survive not eating for more than 75 days. They say you can't survive without drinking water for maybe about 10 days. But no one can live or survive without hope. Many of you may have read the story by Viktor Frankl, his memoir in Auschwitz. The underlying point was while he was in a concentration camp, many people died. And the main thing was people didn't have something to hope for. We all live our lives each day, but when you come fundamentally down to why we aspire to continue living, is because there's hope somewhere. Hope of a brighter tomorrow, hope of something good, something better. Over the past year, 2 young men came up to me and they told me that they wanted to die because they saw no hope in life. It's a recurring thing. I remember one time I took a physics exam, and it was so hard. The hardest exam I'd ever taken. And I thought I didn't do well at all. I came from a background of being academically apt, and so I remember coming out of that exam thinking to myself, oh gosh, what's the meaning of my life? And I'm not even joking. I went home depressed. And then the exam came back, and apparently all of us did very, very poorly. So the teacher scaled it up, and then I still got an A. But the point is, something so simple. I had lost hope that I might get a good grade. So much so that I genuinely felt depressed and asked myself the question, what's the meaning of life? As I get older, I start to lose hair. My hair is thinning. And I believe that hope is what keeps my hair still on my head. So, we've always yearned and searched for hope in some way, shape, or form. And it's because of this yearning that we have turned to God in some way. We're always striving, always looking. And many times it seems that the answers are outside of us. Throughout history, many different people have tried to search for God. It's so interesting. This Christianity developed out of Israel into Europe, the Middle East, or the Near East at the time. Yet when pilgrims or when voyagers went to other parts of the world, they found out that they had spirituality too. It's so interesting that a world that was not so connected still shared this value and trait of yearning and believing and worshiping. Although it looked different, it was everywhere. We have continued to search for God, so much so that we have looked for God in the sun, the moon, the stars, the planets, in the earth, in the ocean, in the trees. That's how much humankind have longed for God. And not just that, and also people. The pharaohs of the time were people who considered themselves a god to the people. Many of you know the story of King Nebuchadnezzar. In Africa, we say King Nebuchadnezzar. When I say to the children, they all start laughing. But he built himself a statue to be worshipped. There is something, of course, about the aspiration of humans to become God, but also the yearning of humans to seek God. And the story of the Bible is a story of God trying to reveal him or herself to us. Because in the beginning of the garden, everything was lost. Our relationship with God was lost. And so all throughout, mankind had been plunged into darkness, into sin, because we didn't know where to go, we didn't know where to search, we didn't know where to look. And so God worked through the prophets, God worked through the various different central figures of all of human history to be able to come and let us know, hey, God is real and this is what God wants you to do. They were persecuted, but the point is, God worked through them. Yet till today, despite all that has happened, many of us might still question, is God real? Has anyone ever asked that question before? Is God really real? I think some people, a lot of you never question. That's beautiful. That's wonderful. And I think maybe it's because you had an experience. I was talking to one young man about 3 months ago, and he's just getting older, and I noticed I hadn't seen him in a while. I sat with him and I was talking with him. And I could tell he had reached a phase in his life where he was making his faith his own. His whole life, his parents had told him God was real. His whole life, his parents had told him that to follow true parents. His whole life, he was coming to church. His whole life, he was just living a religious life. But he didn't truly believe in it. And that's a story for many of us. That's my story. So in one moment I asked him, what would it take for you to believe in God? And he said, if God revealed himself to me today. Some of us may have asked or said such a thing. When I was in Africa, my teachers always used to say, seeing is believing. You tell the teacher, I did my homework, but I left it at home. Seeing is believing. And growing up, that's been a part of what I thought too, that seeing is believing. But now I ask the question, is seeing really believing? It's so interesting. Because we know from the stories that are told. Every Sunday I keep going back to the story of Moses. I love the story of Moses because it was God trying to direct a chosen people to come to understand his identity. And so we know that within that story, the Israelites continued to doubt Moses over and over and over again. Even though it says manna came from the sky, right? Even though they were saved. Yet, it reached a point where God says that he will make himself revealed to the people. So he gathered everyone at the base of Mount Sinai, and it says the presence of the Lord fell upon them. And that they saw. When they saw God, it says they were so scared that they said, moving forward, we'd like to hear only from Moses. Just an interesting little bit. But the point is, God reveals himself to the Israelites. And then before God reveals, God shows the supernatural, right? The whole point of Moses going to the Pharaoh and challenging the wise men, in the beginning, the Pharaoh said, he calls his wise men to do what Moses did, and Moses outdoes them, right? Each time. And then it gets to a point where they can't do what Moses does. And so my God is greater than whatever God you believe in. And the Israelites witness this. The Israelites are liberated from Israel. The Israelites experience firsthand the supernatural. And then God comes and descends upon to make himself visible to them. Yet they still did not believe. When they were asked to go out and check the land of Canaan, most of them came back saying that they're too powerful. They didn't believe that their God was capable. The God who let them out of Egypt lead them to victory. It's so interesting. It's so interesting, human nature. That's why I asked the question, is seeing really believing? I believe many of us have had some kind of experience that felt maybe supernatural, some kind of experience that felt out of the ordinary, some kind of coincidence that seemed too real to just be a coincidence. Yet at some point in our lives, a little later, we turn to that and we say, we justify it. Maybe it was just by chance. Maybe I was hallucinating. There's a famous story about I forget the name of the man, maybe some of you can remind me. Is it Ebenezer? He was a neurosurgeon, and he consistently told people that these spiritual experiences that are had are because of the brain hallucinating. And he happened to fall ill, and there was a certain part of his brain that was not functioning. He had to be put to death in order to be treated. And the part of his brain that he said was was indicative of hallucination was not functioning, yet when he went to the spirit world, or he had a spiritual experience. He went and he met a woman. He later comes back to life and realized that was his wife's sister or something of that sort that he had never met before. And then now he becomes a proponent. He goes out to the world and teaches them the spirit world is real, right? Many of us, God makes known, God tries to teach you, tries to tell you in some way. But sometimes I feel that these experiences, when we ask so strongly for them, can actually make it harder. Harder to have the purity of faith that God longs for each and every one of us to have. I remember in Korea 2024, Yeonanim, that's mother's daughter-in-law, she came to us and she shared. She usually shares stories about mother, because many members don't have the experience to be with, engage with mother physically. There was one thing she said that made me think again. She said, I get to meet mother every day, but I feel it's even more precious when members who have never met or seen mother meet her just once in their lifetime. It's something that they hold on to. It's something that they treasure. For some reason, as people, we tend to start to take for granted those who we meet with every day. We tend to take for granted the closeness of relationships that we have. So that was something that was interesting that I pondered over. The human heart is so fleeting. The human heart is changing. Here in Las Vegas, they say about 150 couples get married. It's called the marriage capital of the world, right? Yet Las Vegas is also the divorce capital of the world. Say about 30 couples get divorced, get finalized their divorce just in Clark County every day. Why is that? In many marriage clauses, they'll ask the question, do you agree to love this person? Till death do you apart. Like over and over. I find it so fascinating, so interesting. Like it happens over and over again. People make that strong commitment, make that conviction that yes, till death do us apart. Yet so many people don't keep that promise. The human heart is fleeting by nature, perhaps by sinful nature. And so, throughout history, we've all longed for, we have all yearned for God in some way, shape, or form. But when we don't have a guide, someone whom God is working through to speak to us, we can come up with our own versions and understanding of reality. That is the purpose and that is the essence of the Messiah. To come and to show us the way. Otherwise, you might have to sacrifice 20,000 people to the gods by taking out their hearts while they're still alive. Otherwise, you might have to, at least in part of my culture in Ghana, there was every time that a chief died, it was a scary time. Because my school was right next to a chief's palace. And I remember, it must have been in 6th grade or 7th grade. I remember hearing that, the chief has died. The reason why it's so daunting is because there is I don't know if it's still happening, but there was an ancient practice of when a chief dies, you send the chief to the spirit world with 6 heads. You put the coffin on top of the head, on top of the heads, because those people will be the guide of the chief in the afterlife. Anyways, when you don't have a clear guide, certain things happen. Our view of life starts to change, starts to turn into a direction that is far from God. So that's why God reveals himself to us, and God did. God did through the Israelites. And despite what they saw, despite what they witnessed, unfortunately, many of the tribes still turned away from God, as we know. And I find it also fascinating, the story of David, this pure young man who believed in the God who saved and liberated the Israelites, who took down Goliath when the entire army of the Israelites were too scared to go forward. Had a faith so strong, God said, "This is a man after my own heart," who then became the new king. Yet even him, he faltered in his own faith. Right? Committed adultery and killed the husband of Bathsheba, Uriah. God is real. Yet I believe that when God reveals himself to each and every one of us, what's very important is that we continue to uphold whatever it is that the presence of God has brought forth within our lives. And what I mean by that is, when we look throughout all of history, someone might look at the story of Saul, might look at the story of David, and ask the question, is God really with this man, with this person? Throughout history, I met with some of our members this week, and one of them mentioned that they were interested in Christianity. But when they looked at the history, they disbelieved. When you look at the story of Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi studied very much Christian theology. He studied Muslim theology. But he had a problem. Because the very creeds of Christianity that he was studying was not a reflection of those who claimed to be Christian when he was in South Africa. These were the same people who continued to oppress the Indians and people of different races. The English who were in India claimed to be Christians, came as the conquistadors, claimed to missionize, but what happened? Not so great things happened. Some of you may know that the Jesuit missionaries went to Japan in the mid to late 16th century. When they went there, they were well received. People loved the missionaries. The leaders loved to trade, the trade that was happening there. So there was no issue. There was no issue at that time. But history writes that at one point, I believe Emperor Hitohito is that man after Nobunaga? Hideyoshi has big and grand plans of unifying the whole Japan, but more than that, conquering China, the Korean Peninsula and China. So then he goes to the Jesuit missionaries, Coelho, to discuss these plans. And then the missionary, in his own glee and wanting to win the support of the emperor, offers his warship. And he says, I can go back to Europe and bring you more, so you can conquer whatever land that it is that you wanted. And then Hideyoshi comes out of that conversation rethinking the essence of the missionaries. He's happy that they can get warships, but then he thought about the immense power behind them. And that if Japan seeks to serve the purpose of them, they might turn those very warships against them. He felt a lack of genuineness in the faith. He felt threatened. And right there, he kicked out all the missionaries from Japan and persecuted Christians. The persecution was so brutal that years later in the late 19th to 20th century, people came back and there was just an underground movement of missionaries who had passed on traditions since that time. When you look at the story of colonization around the world, it can be so brutal. People who claim to know Jesus, people who claim to believe in God, were practicing certain things that were atrocious. So, in all of history, when God worked with people, there was always something that tainted that faith in some way, shape, or form. And that's the responsibility that comes with being chosen, is to, as much as you can, to be that representation. But it's the very reason why many people today turn away from religion. Because when you say religion, many people think of the jihadist. When you think of religion, we think of the atrocities of all of human history. They say one of the bloodiest wars in all of history was between the Protestants and the Catholics in the 30 Years' War. Religion. And Protestant and Catholic, this is not inter-religion. This is intra-religion, household fight. When you see that, how can you believe? How can you believe when someone says, love your neighbor like yourself, and then goes on to massacre the next person? It's hard. So right now, today, in today's world, people are turning away. They don't want to hear religion. In fact, many of you might even say today that you never joined a religion, you joined a movement. Because of the association with it. And I'm here to say that because God never created religion. God never created church. That was never the intention. God's dream was to build one family on this earth. That is the heart behind all of this. Yet we go and we add our own spin on things, and sometimes we misrepresent God's heart. When we think and we look back to the times when people knew God or didn't know God at all, there were certain guidelines that were put in place. You know, I keep referencing this, but we read the book of Leviticus, right? The book of Leviticus. They say many people, it's called the graveyard of biblical whatever, those who try to read from front to back. Leviticus is so interesting. It's about the laws, how they're meant to live. It says many things that you might find horrendous today, right? It says many things about what should happen to someone who stole this, who stole that, someone who blasphemes the name of the Lord, someone who commits adultery, someone who is homosexual, someone who is this or that. It says many things on what should be done to them. And if you read that today, you might be, oh my goodness, this is crazy. But we have to understand the context of that. Why was that instituted? These laws didn't just come about just because God wanted to put laws in place. These laws came about because the Israelites were committing these things as they were wandering through the wilderness. And what happened? Moses had to spend hours each day mediating. Okay, what did you do? What did you do? All right, well, let's figure it out. So much so that his own father-in-law, Jethro, had to come and tell him, why don't you set up a council? Why don't you, and then so that they can handle these things and whatnot. And then Moses goes up to Mount Sinai. He receives the laws. And then he starts to educate them. He starts to institute laws so that it can be taken care of. But what we hear over and over again from Jesus is, you have read or you have said. You have read that it was said or that it was written. And then he gives a corrective of it in that time. An eye for an eye. Yet what did he say? To turn the other cheek. You have heard that it was said. He comes to remind us of what is important, what is the essence of it all. Religion is what took Jesus to the cross. Because we were stuck in our belief of what should be, that no man can claim him or herself as similar to God. That's blasphemous. Faith. The Bible reads, is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Indeed, by faith our ancestors received approval. By faith we understand that the worlds were prepared by the word of God, so that what is seen was made from things that are not visible. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Is knowing that something will be even though you haven't seen. Is having faith that if you believe in God, your soul, your heart, for all of eternity will find peace in heaven. That is faith. We know the story of Thomas, doubting Thomas. Jesus had appeared to the disciples, yet when they gathered and shared their stories, he says, I will not believe until I have seen, until I can put my hand through the hole in his hand and in the scar on his side. And Jesus walks in. Jesus puts his hand through the hole and on the side. And he says, Thomas, you have seen and then you have believed. Yet blessed are those who have not seen, yet believed. There is something pure about that faith. That is what faith is. If I told you that you have a sister in Japan, I'm not being prophetic here, I'm giving an example. You can believe and have faith in it, right? The moment your sister shows up, you don't really need faith anymore. It's hope of the things unseen. It says, by faith we understand that the worlds were prepared by the word of God, so that what is seen was made from things that are not visible. In the Bible, Jesus says, at that time the disciples came to Jesus and asked, who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Then he called the child whom he put among them and said, truly, I tell you, unless you change and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. The disciples were arguing with each other. And then they asked Jesus, who amongst us is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Maybe one of them was fasting for longer. Maybe one of them had been praying longer than the others. Maybe another one had been studying Jesus' words so intently. Maybe another one was doing miracles. Whatever it was, they wanted to know and have assurance that one of them, they all taught and wanted to be the greatest. Yet Jesus didn't say Peter or Thomas. No. John, whoever. He says, he called a child. A child. And he says, truly I tell you, unless you change and become like a child, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. It's so interesting seeing children so pure at heart. I see Joanna every Saturday. She's 12, I think, turning 13. So pure. Her heart, she just wants to, just supporting whatever it is. If there's a question, she always has an answer. She wants to answer that question. And I've seen that over and over again over the years. You always have some children who are so pure at heart. Yet my pain just comes about because I know people go from middle school, they get into high school, they get into college, and I've seen it. Many people start to lose the glitter in their eyes. They start to be hurt somewhere, some way. They experience certain things of life and that goes away. Someone betrays you one time and it's harder to trust again. And that's true. Why would you trust again if someone betrayed you? But that is not what God is trying to teach us. God is teaching us to trust again, to love again, to continue to believe. Before the world came to you, before your life was changed, before you experienced bitterness and sorrow, that pure innocence and humility. If you ask Joanna today, she's not going to tell you, I know God better than you. I'm going to be so great in the kingdom of heaven. No, it's so much more pure. To let go of our pride, our ego, and have a humble yearning for God. That is a faith that Jesus spoke of. And then he said to them, because of your little faith, for truly I tell you, if you have the faith the size of a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it'll move, and nothing will be impossible for you. It's so interesting what faith can do. Faith. Everything comes to be because someone believed or had faith that could have been. Right? Many of us carry an iPhone or a phone because one time somebody thought it was possible. We fly on planes because sometimes one day somebody thought that was possible. Some of us eat rare steak because sometimes somebody thought that was possible. Or even sushi or whatever it is, raw. Because someone hoped, someone saw it, someone believed and had faith. And so Faith can do wonders. Can do wonders. And we know the story of Jesus walking on the water. The disciples saw him in the distance. And they're just wondering what's going on. And then Jesus calls on Peter to come. Peter is trembling, uncertain what to do. But he follows the calling of his master and he steps into the water. And he's walking. Whatever you may believe, whatever scientific, whatnot, the Bible says he walked. And then he wavered in his faith. He got scared. And then he fell into the water. Jesus came and saved him. Many times, we have faith and we have strength. When we start to lose faith is when we start to lose that strength. I share this one story over and over again because it was my moment of coming to truly turn to God. And that was when I was 16 years old in my dormitory, waking up to go to church and having my roommate share with me why he's an atheist. I tried to get him to go to church and he prevented, well, I talked to him so much I missed church. My point is, he says that he doesn't believe in God because he believes Christians are weak. And that Christians or people who believe in God are weak because they feel they can't do anything without God. And back then, I thought about it very deeply. I was like, yes, I pray to God right before my exams. I pray to God when I'm in trouble with my dad. I pray to God so that I don't have to suffer the consequences of my actions. But I didn't really pray to God in other times. Maybe right before my meal, I said the same prayer for the past 20-something years. It's just anyways. That's what it was. And so when he said it, it hit me so hard, I just had to reflect on, do I believe in God? Or do I use God as a crutch? But if he asked me that question today or told me that today, I'd say yes. I can do nothing without God. That I need God in my life. In fact, I don't want to do anything without God. That's been God's dream and God's hope, that each and every one of us can invite God into our hearts. They say there's a God-sized hole in our hearts that only God can fill. That's what God is hoping for. So that the next time you go out and you eat sashimi, that God may enjoy it too. The next time you turn to your wife and tell her you love her, that God can feel that too. Jesus said, what you do to the least of them, you have done unto me. God is within each and every one of us. And this pure, unadulterated faith is something that brought people to this country. I find it wonderful reading about this, learning about this. Why did they come to America, Puritans? Because they were persecuted in England. So they came here to be able to worship freely, to build a city on a hill, the city that we had all dreamed of, hoped of. That's the story of Mormonism too. Zion. People want to build that thing because what they're in became maybe corrupted. The Puritans come and then many of them die, but the first thing they build is God, is the church. And I feel that in my bones, that the essence of this country is tied to that freedom to turn to God. I remember 14 years old, August 11th. On August 10th, I got on the plane in Africa by myself. For the first time, I flew in a plane. August 11th. Was about to land. I looked out the window and I saw the Statue of Liberty. maybe it's hard to feel this if you're an American. But coming to this country, the words that just rang in my ears were, America the beautiful, land of the free, the home of the brave. Something wonderful about the spirit that founded this country. Something so great. Yet, where have we turned to? People are looking for God everywhere. Even on the money, it says, in God we trust. Yet now people are putting that above God. They said if you think about anything, or you care about anything more than God, that's your God. The famous comedian Chris Rock once says, all my life I've been looking for God and he's right here in my pocket. God is real. God is here. When the Garden of Eden was created, there was no church. When the Garden of Eden was created, there were no chairs. When the garden was created, no cameras, no computers. It was just the relationship with God. Mother shares, there were countless times when I asked, I have no more strength to walk this difficult path. It's impossible for me to continue. God, why are you asking me to follow this road? And in those moments, I had to have unyielding faith, resolution, and patience. And that is what shaped who I am today. And I know everyone has some struggle in our lives. In fact, living is to struggle, because by struggling, we grow. Mother is saying, it is in those moments that's important that we have this unyielding faith. Faith will carry us through. People are fighting today in Iran. People are fighting today in Sudan. Why do they keep fighting? Because they have faith that they're going to win. Or at least they're so worried about the devastation. What will happen if they don't win? So, the path of faith is not easy, because we want certainty as people. We want to know. If I study this section, I'm going to pass my exam, right? We want to know that. If you're, anyways. The classes I dislike the most, there's no certainty. We want to know that if I take this path on this GPS, I'm going to end up where I am. We want certainty. Recently, I started driving to places without GPS. But it's actually it's incredible, actually. It's almost as if your mind knows. I don't know what it is, but you know where you're going and you kind of get there. Maybe in the last minute you need to, check. But it's having faith. It goes a long way. Right, Alden? And Mother says, now is the time to elevate yourselves based on absolute faith, absolute love, and absolute obedience. To elevate ourselves. Let us return to that. Not just faith when it's convenient. I'm going to believe in God today because everything is okay. What about when things don't go so well? What about if you lose your job? What about if you lose your car? You get in a car accident? What about if something tragic happened in your life? Would you still believe? Would you still hold on to God? That's the faith of children Jesus was talking about. Would you still believe? And God shows an example even in the story of Job, right? This man was wealthy. And Satan tested guys like, this man believes in you because he has everything. And then God allowed his riches, his relationships, his health to be taken away from him. Yet Job continued to stay true and faithful to God. And he said God blessed him 7 times over. Let's return to absolute faith. Absolute faith. And it's not going to be easy because life is not easy. Jesus knew that Judas Iscariot was going to betray him. He knew. He knew that that was the night. Yet he had faith. We don't talk about this enough, but he had faith. Maybe through mentioning it to him at the Last Supper, he might turn his life around. He had faith. It doesn't look like what we live by. I think many of us, we have our guards up to protect ourselves. But let's truly live like Jesus lived. Let's truly live like true parents live. Absolute faith. With absolute love. Absolute obedience. And if we do, no matter what happens, whether they come and they take away our church, whatever happens, if our leader, myself, or your friend who love God so much turned a different way, that your faith will not be shaken. We have to separate the institution from what we believe in. And we all have that experience somewhere in our lives where God touched your soul, where you felt that God was real, that your parents were real. Hold on to that. Hold on to that, and don't let life come and make that bitter. Don't let bitterness and sorrow take you away from God. Let your heart continue to have hope, just like a child. Just like a child believes they could become a whale or an astronaut, whatever it is. Have faith. That's what God is looking for. And let's return the essence of our church, the essence of our movement, to that of what God had originally hoped for. A true family where God is there as the parent, and we are there as true brothers and sisters, caring for one another, allowing God's love to extend to each other. Let us return to faith in the most pure, unadulterated form there is. And maybe that faith will move mountains in our lives or in this providence. Will bring about the world we'd always dreamed of, we'd always hoped for. A world of peace, a world of harmony, a world of true joy. God bless you all. Thank you.